Hi, I'm Rowan Marie, and today we are going to work on a hat. Now, this is not a knit or a crocheted hat. This hat is done using a process known as Nalbinding. Now, Nalbinding uses these blunt needles and short lengths of yarn. This is just acrylic, super bulky yarn, just so that it goes fast. I don't have a lot left of this, so this might be a fairly small hat. Maybe suitable for a child. But, so, Nalbinding comes from Israel, I believe, originally. Now you see I've got maybe 2 arms lengths of yarn, just from one hand to the other, outstretched as far as they'll go. And then I cut off the end. Traditionally, you would use wool and you would just tear the ends so that you can splice them easier, but I'm going to show you later on a technique for making a knotted splice that the knots it uses 2 knots that pull together, and it's very strong and very sturdy and not too bulky. Now, this is the needle, and this is what I use to thread it. This is just a twist tie that I've made into a loop with the tails on the end, and that's just to aid in threading the needle as I push it right back out through. Now, I should say that I am actually disabled. My right hand does not work very well. So I'm showing you this and telling you this here, I'll try holding it this way, to show you that not only is Nalbinding an interesting piece of history, but it is also something that just about anyone can do. It's a little tricky to get started, but once you do, and I'll show you, I've got a nice contrast between the table and the yarn, so I can show you pretty easily how it all goes together. But once you get going, it's not that bad. So now, I've got the yarn on the needle with a short tail, and you see it's just right through the eye of the needle, and then the long working piece. And this working piece is where it starts, at the far end of this working piece. And you'll see why I have it cut into a short segment pretty quickly. So now what I'm going to do is, now there's a couple ways you can make the foundation loop. The foundation loop is for when you're starting from zero, from a closed end, which, like a hat, you start at the top of the hat and work your way down. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can either just make a simple loop with the end under the working part, or you can do a slip knot. I usually just do a loop because it all holds together in the end. Now what I do, I usually do these first few stitches on the table, flat. I do the whole thing, it's what's called flat, as opposed to off the thumb. I've tried off the thumb, I'm no good at it, so I just work flat. Now, it's all about going over or under and following a path. So this first loop, this first stitch that I'm going to do, is just going to go, here's the loop. It goes over and then under that same part of the loop. Here, I'll try to show it without getting my hand in the way. goes over and then turns and goes under, same piece of loop, and then goes over the working end. And you pull until you have, and you gotta work with it a little bit, until you have a nice loop right there. And that is your first loop. That is not your first Oslo stitch, because that is the type of stitch that we are doing today, is the Oslo stitch. But now, what you do is you go over that foundation loop, and then go underneath both the foundation loop and the first cast on loop. And then you go over that same piece and over the working end. And so you're basically making loose knots. And that's the gist of Nalbinding, is making knots. And so now, if you can see, we have 2 loops. Here, I'll try to pick this up so you can see it a little bit more clearly. You see the two loops. There's 1 and 2. And now we can do our first proper Oslo stitch. Which, because we are doing it on a foundation loop, you first go front and then under. So this is an F1. So you go front and then you go under, and then over. Here, I'll show you that again. You go over the foundation loop, and then you go under everything with these first 2 loops, and then you go to the inside of the second loop, or of the first loop that you did, which is the second loop back, and then you go up through to go over that loop, the last loop, and the working end. Confused? So was I, and so am I, in fact. I still don't quite understand how it works, I just know that it does. So this may not be the most helpful tutorial, but hopefully this will at least show you the process so that you can get an idea. And so now we have 1 full Oslo stitch at the end here, and then we have the loop preceding it. And then we also have another loop preceding that, but we're done with that loop for now. So now what we do is we just repeat, and we go over the foundation, and then under the last 2 loops, and then over those 2 loops and the working end. So it is under, over. With a turn in the middle. And so now you see we've got a couple loops here. I'll see if I can get a closer picture of it. And you can see here, let's get it in the light. You've got stitch, stitch, stitch right there. Those 3 stitches, and then it does keep going back. So there's actually 4, I believe, right now. And you just basically continue this a couple more times. So if I go quiet, that's because I'm concentrating. So you just do another stitch, and then another one. Let me just make sure I'm going the right way. Now you can see how my hand doesn't work very well. It works well enough for just holding things that aren't fragile, but I wouldn't want to hold like a dry flower with it or something, because that would fall apart pretty quickly. Okay, so now we've got a couple stitches on our foundation loop, okay? So now what we need to do is we need to join in the round. We want to do this before there's too many too many loops in the foundation row. I guess, no, we can do like a couple more, I guess. Let's do just a few more. And then I can show you how to join on in the round. Which that's where the fun stuff begins. Oops, did I miss something here? Now you can undo the last stitch, but going further back than that is very difficult. And so you can't, here you go, over, under, over, over. Well, over, under, over. I promise you, it makes sense once you get into it. And so there's one more, over, under, because you're going under both, and through that, which is the turn, and then over. And the idea is you have these nice, even loops. You want them to be fairly even in size. You will tend, or at least I tend, to go smaller as I go on, and I get tighter. And that can be a problem, so you need to really have good stitch discipline. And I am shaking that camera. But anyway, now that we've got a couple loops on this foundation row, now what we can do is take this tail. This is the tail for the foundation loop, and you just grab it and you hold on to the first couple of loops that you stitched, the first couple of stitches, and you just pull this tight. And it will hold together, I promise you. Now you've got this flat round piece here. Now you don't need to go super tight, but you wanna get a nice snug, not a knot, but loop. And then I usually hold it in my hand, and now instead of going over and under the foundation loop, you see this loop right here. This is the first loop that I did. And I go over and under that foundation, or not that foundation loop, but that first loop. And then the rest is the same as before. I go under these two loops. See, there's one loop and there's two loops. I don't know if you can see that, but here, I'll get real close. So there's one loop and two loops right there. So that second loop, you go under and then you turn and go over those two loops and over the working piece. That is under, over. And joining on with that first loop that we did is called F1. That is front one, because that is just how it's worked. Now, we did one stitch into that loop. Now we're going to do a second stitch into that same first loop that we did, because we're doing increases right now. Right now we're going to increase rapidly, because this is the crown of the hat. So you go over that same loop, and then under the last two loops that you stitched. And then you turn and go over. And you pull. Do not pull tight. You're never pulling super tight. And especially when you're making your loops, your stitches, you do not want to pull super tight, because then you will not be able to get the needle in the next one. Now, I could even do a third stitch in the same one, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go to this one. This is now the second loop that we ever stitched. This is the second one. And so we go over, and then under, and then we go under, under, over, 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 just like before. Now you can see I'm catching up to my tail here, so I can pull that out a little bit further and then just catch both the tail and the working end with my last two fingers right here like this, and still have the yarn on the needle. Now, I'm not sure if this needle has a large enough eye to join on without cutting. I mean, without removing it from the needle. Not cutting. You're always cutting pieces off, but for new pieces. But now I'm going to do one more stitch, going through that same second loop again, because we're doing an increase again. And then, now this yarn is not the greatest yarn. It's just a super bulky acrylic, and I chose it because it's dark and the table is light. So okay, now I've got two stitches on that loop, but now you see I'm running out of yarn. I'm running out of length. So I'm going to pull this back so that I have a nice length here, and I will show you the magic knot. Pardon for the creaky seat. And so I'm pulling out another double arm's length, which for me is about 6 feet, because I am tall. And then what you're doing is you're just tying two simple, I believe the term is an overhand knot. It's just a single knot. You're not doing a square knot or anything. And you tie the end of the new piece on a little ways in from the end of the old piece. And you'll see why in a second. And then you just pull that through and pull it tight. And now you see this knot will slide back and forth on the old piece. But now you take the end of the old piece, make sure to keep track of which is which. Take the end of the old piece and tie a second, just a simple single knot through or on to the new length. And you see you got just that little tail. You don't want too much of a tail or else you're wasting yarn. And now you've got this loop here in the middle with the two knots on either side, and you just take the old length and the new length and you pull. And you can pull them apart, and you just pull the knots tight so that when you pull, it's just a knot. Now let's see if I have backed myself into a corner, or if I can, I believe I've backed myself into a corner, because I cannot fit that knot through the eye of this needle. Unfortunately, that's going to slow me down a little bit. So let's try pulling these apart, see if I can fit it through just a single knot. Nope. So I'm going to have to cut these ends off. Not a big deal. You just cut here, cut, come on, cut here. I never claimed to be an expert. And here's your new piece, and here's your old piece, and now I'm going to just pull the needle off. Now let's redo that magic knot, now that we've got the needle off of it. That is unfortunate. Had I known that it was going to be that difficult, I would have used a needle with a larger eye. But, well, you know, it's how these things go. So I got the one knot, and then tying onto the new piece. Now you see, I am not an expert knotter. I cannot knot. To quote, I believe Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. Or one of the characters. It was the whole sequence was just puns about knotting and about tying knots and doing all that. It was quite silly. So now I've got these two knots, and you just pull tight, and it's a nice strong join. Now you can trim off. Here, let's actually hold it so that I'm not going to miss. Trim off the ends. Those can go to the side. And now we've got our new end, and we've got more length, which is good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up this. This is that twist tie again, which I was hoping I wouldn't need to use anymore, but like I said, these things happen. And then I just, there we go. I insert that in there, just pull it through. It's just a makeshift needle threader. That's all it is. And now we are ready to continue. I promise you this gets faster. Like, it's not going to always be this slow, though Nalbinding is a much slower fiber art than, say, knitting or especially crochet. Now, we've got the two stitches on that loop that we just stitched on. But now we've got this fresh loop, which is the next loop. This is the third loop that I believe the third loop that we ever did. And you again go through, and then you're going under and under. Now it is important to note, we are not going through this previous loop, this loop right here. We are going over and then under just this loop, and then under just the two previous stitches that we just did. And then we turn and over. So now, and then you just kind of work the knot through, because that's the knot that we put in. Now, if this were wool, I could just do an invisible splice, just like a spit splice or something, which is a little gross, but hey, it's how the Vikings did it, or how the Norse peoples did it, because Viking is a verb, not a noun, or not a pronoun, or whatever. I don't. Adjective? I don't. English was not my strong suit. I enjoyed English class. To be fair, history was not my strong suit. You know what it was? Math. And this is a little bit of geometry. Of just understanding, not so much angles, but shapes. Just understanding the shapes that you're going through. And now I've got two stitches on this one. So I'm going to move on to the next loop, which is this loop right here. I'm going to go under, well, over, then under, turn, over. And you can see I'm starting to speed up a little bit. I'm trying to keep this in frame, sorry. But you've got over, under, over, over. And you don't have to talk to yourself while you're doing it. But it sometimes helps just to keep track. Sometimes when I'm doing partial increases, when I'm only increasing certain stitch, like a little bit, I will kind of chant to myself. I will do double, double, single, double, double, single, so that I know, or sometimes I'll do 1, 2, single, 1, 2, single, so that I know I'm on stitch 1 of a double, then I'm on stitch 2 of a double, and then I'm on a single. It's complicated, but it's how my brain works. My brain is kind of weird, as are many things about me. So anyway, so that's 2 stitches on this loop, so let's go to this next one. And we're not going to be doing full increases the whole time, because that would be silly. Then you'd just have a flat doily, and in fact, you'd actually end up with something far worse than that. You'd end up overtaking. You can increase faster than it actually increases in diameter or in circumference. So you end up with a kind of wobbly, wavy surface. That's how you know you've gone too far. So right now, we've got a good start here. You know, this is turning into a nice top to the hat. So now I've got one more stitch in this loop, and you see the knot just kind of disappeared into the stitches. It's gone. It's in there, and you can feel it. And it is like this is not going to be the most comfortable hat, I will say. I could have used real wool again, and that would have been more comfortable, though a little bit itchy. But this is good enough for, like, if you're just making like a Christmas present for someone, or even if you're doing this commercially, even if you're doing this to make money, nobody's really going to balk over a couple little bumps, because they understand it's handmade, and that's how these things go. So, okay, so I've got 2 stitches on this loop, so now I go on to this loop. And this loop, I might only do 1 stitch on this loop, just to keep it from overtaking itself. So I'll do single, and then I'll move on. So I've got 1 stitch on this loop, then I'll move on to this loop, which we're already back around. You'll notice there is no start or end. It just keeps going in a spiral. And then I'm going to do that's double 1. And then back through the same one. And it does get a little bit tricky sometimes to try to spot where you're going through, but you just kind of gotta figure it out. Double 2. And I'm just adjusting the stitch size as I go, and that is the crux of it. That is basically how you do an Oslo stitch in the round to make a hat, maybe. And I am not going to show you the entire hat, because that will take between 3 and 6 hours. Something this bulky, probably 3 hours. But I could do a time lapse actually. But you see, now it does tend to try to open up a little bit in the middle. So what you can do, go back to that first tail, and you see where it loops through like that. You can see a kind of a loop right there, and you can make a knot into that loop. Now that we're out of the way, I'm gonna try to just shove it through with the tip of the needle here. That's not going to work. So instead, I'm just pulling this little loop open. I'm trying to push this through. It's very difficult to do this one-handed. There we go. And now, just pull it tight. And then you do it again. Or actually, pull this out, this piece out a little bit, because you want to make a knot through it, through itself, so that it's nice and secure. I do not know proper terminology for knot work. I do not know how to knot. We're going into those puns again. But anyway, and then you just pull it tight, push it up against, just pull it tight, and there. And then you can cut off this tail, so it is no longer in your way. There. It is out of your life. And now, and remember which side you're working on, by the way. And you can tell that because we're doing under, over, over. So after you do a stitch, the working end will be over the previous stitch on the correct side. So you see this was the working end, this is the previous stitch, and it is over, so you know you're on the right side. And I just did a double and a single. So that's my single. So now I'm going to do another double. And I might, in fact, and there's no pattern. There's no, like, oh, you must do exactly 78 stitches with this size needle. No, there's none of that. It's very free form, very flowy. And so that's a single, and then here's the double. And you just pass it under, over. So I might do another double. Just you kind of eyeball it and see if it's starting to curve down too much, like this is. You can go back to doing doubles all the way. And it really evens out in the end. So you don't have to worry too much. But here we go. Got that. And then do another one. And you're going through, and I know I keep pulling it close to myself so that I can see it better, and it ends up just becoming mush on your screen. So, but here we go. That's two. That's a double. And that needs to be pulled tighter. So, okay. And that's how you do the top, the very top of a hat in the Oslo stitch in Nalbinding. So, okay, when I get back to you, there will be a bit more done. So I will show you how slowing down your increases can affect the angle at which the curve happens, which you have to be careful because it is not linear. As you get bigger, slowing down more will make it curve even more until you're almost flat, and then you just stop increasing to do the brim. But anyway, until next time, I'm Rowan Marie, and this has been a Nalbinding demonstration. Bye-bye.